Great to be here again today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, co-founder of GSD Venture Studios. I've been involved in 17 startups. I've been involved in 2 unicorns. I was on the original management team at Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion, and also Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company. Love artificial intelligence and quantum computing, cybersecurity, because as we all know, data is all around us. We got to protect it. So it is with a great honor today that I have Hesam Motlagh from Khosla Ventures. And I know out there all over the world, we talk about Khosla, Vinod Khosla Ventures, really changing everything in a society, transforming. And today, Hesam's going to talk about what Khosla is up to, what's happening, some of the trends in the market. And we want to get to know him a little bit. So with that, Hesam's coming on board. Hi, Hesam.
Hey, Gary, how are you doing? And I know we practiced the name backstage, but it's technically Hesam.
Hesam. I don't know why. Sorry.
It's a tough one. It's not the most common name. It's nothing like Gary. So
yeah, but some people can't say. My Greek grandfather used to call me Getty.
Well, Gary, thanks for having me. It's an honor
to be here. That was my name growing up. So I was like 7 years old. I thought Getty was my real name. So Hesam, let's go down through. So tell me, how do you go through from Miami University to Stanford? I mean, how do you go from molecular biology to venture? I mean, how does the transition work?
Yeah. That's I ask myself that question a lot too. Look, I mean, I don't like talking about myself that much, but if there's 2 themes in answering your question, it's, I've always maximized learning, which has, translated into lots of school, but that doesn't necessarily mean going to school. It's finding also part 2, which is good mentors along the way. Look, I mean, you're from the Midwest as well. I think you went to school in the Midwest at least.
I grew up in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. I've lived all over the U.S. actually, spent a lot of time in the Midwest and of course in California and Palo Alto. So, but I'm originally from Pennsylvania.
Okay. So I grew up in Ohio, so nearby, borderline state.
You guys consider yourself Midwestern, some of you anyhow.
Somehow.
Northeast, and I'm from the mountains in Pennsylvania. I grew up on a farm, a small farm in a 500-person village. So we were in a different category.
Yeah. Well, we digress, but this context is important to answer your question. And that, look, I mean, I came from like Persian immigrant parents who left during the revolution. I grew up in Ohio and fell in love with life at the molecular level in 8th grade and just heads down pursued that honestly all the way through a PhD before I really picked my head up. But, along the way, I had some great mentors and Chris Makaroff at Miami, Ohio, who taught me how to think about science. And then Vince Hilzer at Hopkins, who was my PI or principal investigator, and he mentored me. And when I picked my head up, at the end of all of this, Gary, I asked myself, do I really want to do basic science forever? And I found myself answering that question as no. I wanted to translate these sorts of things. I wanted to, work on that first sentence that everyone puts in their paper of one day these technologies will enable blah, blah, blah. And this is how we get NIH funding. And I think I way overshot it by going from, basic science, then all the way to, becoming a quant at a public trading fund, if you will. So it was applied knowledge, I would say. But I found the sweet spot for me was definitely company formation. I really love talking to people who are taking these basic sciences and basic technologies and, taking the high risk, high reward next step of let's see if we can make this of commercial utility. So I don't know if I've ever publicly said this, but the day my bonus check cleared in 2018 is the day I quit my job at this fund and packed up my car eventually and drove across the country to come to California, knowing I wanted to be part of this entrepreneurial ecosystem. Why here versus Boston? Well, I don't like the cold anymore, just to be honest. But my parents are also in Arizona, so it was nice to be closer to them and just be a quick, Southwest flight away. But I spent probably the last couple of years bouncing around the valley, and this gets to the crux of your question, which is how did I end up, here in venture? I bounced around at some point going to business school, not expecting to get in, to be honest, but I spent almost more time at the medical campus than I did, at the business school. I was just talking to people who wanted to found companies and getting to know the lay of the landscape and trying to answer the question, do I like writing checks for people or do I like taking checks and building things? And actually, truth be told, I really love being an operator. I was lucky enough to be at a biotech startup that IPO'd in December of last year. Seer Bioscience is a proteomics startup, and I really love going deep into problems and finding out how to will it into existence or why it's impossible. With the finite amount of capital you have. But I met Vinod about a year ago, and he said, "Look, if you want to learn more, and this comes back to the theme of learning, if you want to learn the most you can the next couple of years before you go build your own thing, I have this chief of staff role that's open. It's no guarantee you got to go through the interview process, this and that, but you'll get mile wide, couple inches deep, and by far more broad exposure than I would if I went to another couple of startups. So I got lucky. That's probably the short answer. I worked my butt off. I knew what I was passionate about, and was lucky enough to land the role here, and also teach and do research at Stanford as an adjunct professor. I have small pea-sized grants that I get to pretend to be a professor with. So
wow, that's great. Now, okay, so let's go back. You were talking about you at a molecular level at 8th grade. How did that happen? So what did you open up a textbook one day and say, I love this stuff? What really started?
What's funny is I actually got really bad grades up through 8th grade. I decided, well, I want to go to college because I don't want to depend on my parents anymore. So it was a confusing time. Like 8th grade that was actually when 9/11 happened. I mean, not to get political here or anything like that, but being the only Iranian in my high school around that time was just a confusing and interesting time. And one of the few things that really made sense to me was life at the molecular level, or just science in general. It created order to what I would consider chaotic, childhood in a lot of ways. So I don't know. It made sense. I loved it, and I would just read, and I felt enthused by it. So it just compounded over time.
So you didn't get good grades up to 8th grade, but after 8th grade, what happened?
Well, like I said, I wanted to go to college, but I think I just started to actually enjoy learning. Is what I realized. Yeah, so I grew up speaking Farsi and not English. So I was in remedial English up through like I think 3rd or 4th grade or something like that. But yeah, no, I think once I found a passion in learning, and this is at least a recipe that's worked for me, is just optimizing learning in that sense of it's enjoyable to learn things, and I guess at this point taking these learnings and trying to translate them into things that impact other people. So I hope that's an answer.
You said, no, it's perfect. Now, you said something that I've heard many times, and it's really interesting. I've heard it from some of the top family offices. I heard it from entrepreneurs, but willing it into existence. And so tell me about that. So how important is that in terms of thinking about it and manifest and visualization? How important is that in terms of the entrepreneurial journey and from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, Gary. And I will caveat it to your audience that I don't mean to speak from a place of authority here, in that, I've been involved with one startup, 16 less than you, 16 fewer than you, I should say. But what's interesting about this is it's sometimes, Kevin Grimes taught me this at Stanford, and I didn't believe him at first, but now I believe it, in that, it's sometimes better to have no team than the wrong team around the right idea. When I talk about willing it into existence, I think it just takes, and there's different styles for different types of entrepreneurs. Some people are motivated by money, for instance, which is perfectly fine. Businesses are for-profit endeavors. Some people are motivated by fame, and that's perfectly fine too. You want to have a handler and never have to use your credit card again? There you go. Some people want to work with friends and family, but some people want to have this passion, will something into existence. And those are the types of entrepreneurs I would say that we in general tend to gravitate towards. And at the end of the day, building these, you've been involved in 17 of these. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Building companies is really hard. Translating these things is really hard. The odds of failure are high. The highs are high, but there's a lot of lows, and they're very, very low. So this notion of willing it into existence is that, the idea is not enough, and it's really hard. And there's a million reasons why something can fail and will fail. There's this kind of cliche I've heard Vinod say a couple of times, is that, sometimes you just have to stay alive long enough to get lucky. And, there's some truth to that. I don't know what your views are. So
Yeah.
I hope that was
You
helpful.
put yourself in those lucky situations too. One of the things, I'm a psychologist. So when I got started, so my undergraduate degree is in business and psychology. Then I went to graduate school for psychology. And so as a humanistic psychologist, although my research was in physiological psych, I really like the humanistic psychology. Do the right thing, and look at the good things in people, and unconditional positive regard. But I see that a lot because part of your life, and I've seen this around, is that surrounding yourself with positive people, that energy that's around you that can really help, because it's not easy. Doing a startup, if anybody said it's easy, it's not. And my first startup, that I started right out of graduate school. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no mentors, literally, at the time. I had to like go with the seat of my pants. I took loans out, personal loans. I was a single founder, but it succeeded. And it was not because I was smart. It was just because I was really lucky, like 99% luck and 1%. But I was also motivated. I wasn't going to fail. So I focused on the success. And I think, as I go through it, I started the top accelerator in Russia, and I've seen it there. I see it today with the startups all over the world. It's having hope and a passion and believing in your dream and looking yourself in the mirror. Do you really want it or not? Some people, when they look themselves in the mirror, they don't believe they can do it and they're going to fail. But if people look themselves in the mirror and believe they can succeed, they can succeed. I'm going to speak at the United Nations on Friday. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about is technology as a tool for peace, because just like you're saying, there's a lot of prejudice in the world. It kind of hurts, right? And at the same time, we got a whole lot of problems we need to solve as a society. We're not going to succeed, or nothing good's going to happen. We got global warming. We've got population going from 8.1 billion to 13. We got to go down through and figure out how we can work together. And and when you look at it, it's really the spirit of hope, believing that you can accomplish it. And visualization is important. And I really, what you said, at 8th grade, I understand that, because it didn't happen to me till I was I was 4 months to go into college, and I didn't even take my SAT scores. And I was not that good of a student. I was into martial arts and all kinds of other things I really wanted to do. And I remember my father said to me in April of that year, he said, it's coming to September, and, you should be in college. And I didn't even apply. And I said, so I started reading a book a day for 4.5 months. And then I went to a community, Penn College of Technology in Pennsylvania, to get started. And the rest is history, right? I blew through it, but I wish I would have done it in 8th grade like you.
Yeah.
So, and you're a lot smarter than me. I'm a poor country boy.
I don't know about that. I think I just found things that I'm passionate about, and faking it till I make it. Right. So,
well, it's incredible. I mean, so what's it like? So you came out to the Valley, and what was the difference? So, coming from Ohio, so you come with these Midwestern values. What did you see? It's different. What did you think would happen that didn't happen? And what did you see that was just, wow, I can't believe that this is happening in the Valley? What were some of the misconceptions?
Yeah. There's misconceptions and confirmatory conceptions, I would say. So what's interesting is that just culturally, of the friends I know and the parents and families I knew in Ohio, and even on the East Coast, I was living in Baltimore, DC area, going up to New York a lot for work for 8 years, is that people in general, and this is a cultural thing, covet the stability of a job or a career. In that, if you're a lifer at Dow DuPont and you live around, the Philly area, and you went to Westchester, right? Like, that's seen as a stable and a successful career. And what I was actually really surprised about, and I kind of knew about this, but the extent to which it was true was a little surprising, is that actually that would be seen as a negative in Silicon Valley if you're trying to do a startup, right? And, different styles for different types of people, but this notion of not jumping around, but this notion of trying things, and if they fail, that's fine, fail fast. But if they succeed, then go for it, and doing your own sort of thing and having ownership over that was interesting to me, right? I mean, Silicon Valley was, I think, actually, I don't want to misquote anyone else here, but I think it was one of the first places that started to offer equity to normal employees, like engineers and things of that nature, right? To really own the upside of the value that you might be creating. So I found that pretty exciting. I would say also that just the density of passionate people was quite interesting as well. I mean, there are really, really smart people everywhere. This is one of the core theses of GSD, right? Is that, talent is broadly distributed, but opportunity is not.
Yeah, exactly. Intellectual capacity is evenly distributed, and it's crazy that we don't nurture it, right?
Yeah. And to be fair, the the really smart people on the East Coast tend to gravitate a little bit maybe towards like, banking or finance or consulting. And there's a lot of that here on the West Coast too, don't get me wrong, or, just across the world. But, there's just really smart people of equal intelligence on both coasts or just, around the world. They just happen to be applying it to a different set of questions and a different line of inquiry here. And that line of inquiry is actually, I'd say the inversion. This is the unexpected thing, actually, I would say, coming especially from a public investor side of view. I spend most of my time asking what could go wrong. What could go wrong in the thesis? What could go wrong in this company? What am I missing? What am I not right about? And especially in early stage investing, you have to ask the opposite question, which you have to be the hopeful optimist. Like, these companies are, by their very nature, flawed, right? Like, the team's not there, maybe the go-to-market strategy isn't fully there, but what could go right? And that inversion of intuition of going from, the skeptic to the optimist, while maintaining the skeptic lens, that was something that was at least from the investor point of view or even the entrepreneurial point of view, it was a mindset I had never been in and a type of mindset that I'm still learning to this day. So I don't know if that helped answer the question at all.
But that's life, right? I hear that, that's the other side. It's like, I did a TED talk a few years ago and I talked about, the glasses being half full, not half empty. And a lot of times around the world, people look at, they got these, and especially in, like I lived in Russia for 14 years. And I know in Russia, I don't know, maybe not, those kind of things. And you have to have, if you don't believe in something, it's what the Pygmalion effect, the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't believe in it, it doesn't come true. So if you don't passionately believe in it, nothing good's going to happen. So I'm on the same page with you. And I see those soft sides of entrepreneurship are really important. And, being the coach, if you will, the guardian angel, to be able to give them the hope and the spirit is really important. And like you said, it's, I think part of the reason that on the East Coast it's like that, especially in places like Pennsylvania and Ohio, is because you have German immigrants that were very pragmatic. And so you don't have a job. I remember my father said, now, why in the world you went to graduate school? You should go finish your PhD. Why in the world would you want to be an entrepreneur? Get a job, you spent a lot of time in college. And I remember those conversations, but Dad, that's not what I want to do. Why in the world would you waste your time in college then? It's like,
it's interesting. I was going to say, it's interesting you mentioned the European culture component of it, because we interact with some European venture capital firms as well, of course, right? It's interesting. It's become more competitive there, but that's another story that we can unpack if you wanted to, about how capital markets have just become fiercely competitive everywhere. But the European VCs and entrepreneurs are really good at reducing risks, like really good. And but the unfortunate downside of that is if you reduce risks too much, you attenuate the consequences of success, right? And that's a mindset that's a little bit more difficult to wrap your head around, and feeling comfortable with failure, or at least be willing to fail to even present the opportunity to succeed. And this is like loosely based on a quote that Vinod has out there, that his willingness to fail is the reason why he succeeds, or something along those lines. It's the first sentence in this Harvard Business Review case. But that mindset, I think, it's easier to hear. It's difficult to adopt. At least for me, it's been difficult to adopt. Maybe that just speaks to my risk aversion as an individual growing up in Ohio. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think so. From my perspective, one of the other things, I don't know, Hesam, if it's like this for you, but the fear of failure is what really drives you forward, because you don't want to fail. So you're driven forward because you don't want to go down that path. And once you start to accept it, I did this emotional. So emotions are kind of like a cyclone, right? They can go down or they can go up. So the deal is, once they start and it starts to really manifest, and positive things starts to happen. It's like getting up in the morning and you stub your toe on the end of your bed. The rest of the day, you lose your keys. You have a car accident. You have an argument with somebody. You've got to kind of change your mindset and put yourself in a positive frame of mind. And you do that, and you go back to your point, bringing that team in that has that positive energy. I know at GSD, I mean, all of us, right? It's just the way it is. When one person's down, you can feel it, not just hear it. You can feel it. And what happens is we bring the team back up, and what happens? Positive things happen to you. So I see that all over, and but that's really hope, right? And it's across everything you do. You got to believe in it.
Yeah, I mean, I will comment on this just because it also ties into the way we think about entrepreneurship in general and the types of entrepreneurs that tend to be successful. I think the most important point that we're dwelling on here would be just also this notion of passion and vision. And I think a VC's job is to help the entrepreneur think 10x bigger than the way they are thinking, and then like pick their head up every once in a while because they're worried about the next 18 months, right? I got to make sure I don't run out of cash, and helping them keep their eye on the prize, I think, is really important because that's what helps motivate people, and then also that's part of the journey you've signed up for when you take on a partner who's an investor, right? It's a partner. At least that's the way we like to think about it, as a partnership. But yeah, we have this metaphor that we use that it has to do with something Mount Everest, right? And I will not be able to do justice to it compared to the way Vinod or Peter Buckland on our team might be able to describe it. But the idea is, look, if you want to summit Mount Everest, you can't just do it in one day. It has to get done in steps. You have to go to base camps, and you need a team around you to be able to do that, right? And the objective function you're actually trying to optimize isn't, I want to climb as high as possible on day 1 or day 2, because then you could end up in a local maximum. And this metaphor kind of extends to startups in the sense that, you may not actually, and sometimes in the early stage, revenue might be the wrong metric. If you're trying to just maximize revenue over the next 18 months, you might be missing the prize that's waiting for you 5 to 10 years from now. And these little decisions early on can compound. And as humans, we're really bad at intuitively understanding and having appreciation for exponentials. But these little decisions along the way, and the team you hire in particular, help increase the probability of success. That's the objective function. The objective function there isn't maximizing ascension rate; it's maximizing probability of success, right? Or at least probability of ascension, if you will. And the team you hire along the way is what helps affect that probability. And another cliche we have, which is not a cliche, but a saying that's really true, is the company you build is the team you hire, not your business plan. The only certainty of the business plan, especially at a seed stage, is that it's wrong. Yeah, sure, it'll help you to think through a lot of the unknowns that might pop up, and at least shows clarity of thought. And it's really important to do this exercise. But it's sort of the false precision that comes with building a financial forecast in Excel. And I've built way too many of them. I've built hundreds, maybe getting close to thousands at this point. It gives this false air of gives this false sense of precision. It just isn't there. So being able to handle that ambiguity and uncertainty, that's a function of the team, I would say. And for anyone who's particularly interested, we have some great media that's available on our website on this. Like Vinod wrote a great piece called Gene Pool Engineering, and the art and labor of recruiting on how to think about building the team. And instead of thinking of it from like a normal org structure, write down what are your biggest risks as a company, and then who would be the world experts or the best institutions to help de-risk that, and then start recruiting from there. And at least that's a high level overview of the way to think about it. Or how do you actually go out? A lot of people will go raise money, and then the question is, all right, now you're founder, go build a team. And how do you do that? Right? It's
well, that's it's if you go through the steps, that's why having somebody like yourself or Vinod involved in the situation where, I remember with Sun Microsystems, right? With I had lunch with Scott McNeely a couple of years ago, and I was, he told me, he said, always go to a place that you fear the most. You're going to learn the most. And I never forgot. I remember that from the 90s, actually.
Did you say fear? Did I hear you right?
Yeah,
like fear the most?
To fear the most, because you're going to learn the most. And most people don't do that. They shy away from things they fear. When I went to Russia, and people said, "Oh, why are you going to Russia?" I didn't speak Russian at the time. I went in the early 90s, and it was a little bit wild. And then I went back in the 2000s and built several companies. And you got to accept the positives. Look at how you can think differently. Look at how people live their lives wherever they're from. I've traveled around the world a bit, and whether you're in Armenia or Azerbaijan or Georgia or Russia or Ukraine or Belarus, wherever, Australia, you got to look at it from their eyes, right? Because you got to think differently and look at the positive and not the negative, and don't condemn, accept and understand, because it makes it a lot more beautiful. And I think in terms of the team, from my perspective, you guys have done it a whole lot more than I have, but having that positive attitude, like you said, and visualizing things manifest. But if you look at 3 qualities, what are the 3 qualities of the leaders, the CEOs that you look at? It's
Yeah.
3 things that you can say, these are the 3, check the boxes. I think this is a good, right off the bat, this is somebody that could be interesting for us.
Yeah, this is a good question that I might not be able to get down to 3 things. And the answer is always, it depends, right? But this is something we debate and discuss internally consistently, right? But if there was an easy way to identify this, everyone would do it, and it would be a much easier job to try to pick the winners. But statistically, it's really difficult. I think probably the hardest thing an entrepreneur needs to do is to take in all this noise and try to find the signal. Like, they're going to get advice from us, they're going to get advice from blogs online, their friends, their family, their coworkers. They're all going to give them a lot of signal. And it's the entrepreneur's job to take all that noise and signal and try to find what is the actual. And sometimes the answer might be ignore what everyone says and do something completely different. And I think that comes from having an obstinate vision, but being flexible on your techniques. And I think that we ask almost everyone who pitches us this question, like, what's your vision and what are the biggest risks to get there? Because the clarity of thought on that is sort of the marriage you're signing up for if you want to partner together, in my opinion. Actually, I can think of a really good example from Vinod. I wish I could take credit for this one. But Vinod, when he was at Kleiner, invested in Juniper Networks. And him and the co-founder, at least I believe not the co-founder, sorry, the founder did a bunch of customer interviews and, asked the question to a bunch of the telecom companies, TCP/IP or ATM, which one do you think is going to be the winner in the long run? Every single interview, 100% said that ATM is going to be the winner. And they had to ignore conventional wisdom. These include like some pretty high up telecom people who make these statements, right? And there's a Wall Street Journal article that has a little bubble graph that shows this. But that Juniper Networks investment going against conventional wisdom and saying, no, we're going to bet on TCP/IP, ended up being a 2,500x return, right? That's pretty wild.
No.
Even in the Valley, right? So that idea of being having the vision and being willing to be flexible on the techniques, I think, is really important. Take in input and always, be willing to adjust course. And I think we already talked a little bit about the hiring and the importance of the team. But I'd say the two other pieces, this is a Hesam opinion here, is salesmanship, I would say, and then strategy, of course, and I'll unpack them separately. When I say salesmanship, I'm not talking about, the greased up guy with the Bluetooth, trying to sell you a used car. I'm talking about this notion of being able to tell a vision and a story in a cohesive manner. And yes, that translates to being good at pitching typically. But the reason why I think personally it's really, really important, and actually I've heard other people internally say this as well, is that if you pitch well, you have that salesmanship ability, then you have an ability to get other people excited and an ability to hire people, right? What you want to do is you want to go find someone who looks like they're overqualified to come join your startup because you want to hire ahead of the curve, right? You don't want to hire the right person for the next 18 months. You want to hire the right person who's going to be there when you're, in theory, a $10 billion market cap company. And to land people like that, you need to be able to sell a good story. And it takes months to convince these people to come on and join, right? You have them come on initially be an advisor, maybe you're a consultant, and then over the course of time, those things transition. Then strategy, I would say, especially in early stage ecosystem, this is a really hard problem, which is you need to have a schizophrenic personality in terms of experimentation versus execution, right? And finding that delicate balance is industry specific, is hypothesis specific, and things of that nature. But even running an organization that has an execution arm and an experimenting arm, those are diametrically opposed cultures.
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
Right? Which is really hard. Yeah, right? No, it's really hard because the people who are execution focused, they have these OKRs or objective metrics that's like deals done, sales, customers landed. And the experimentation crew, how do you measure the success of an experiment? Probably, I don't know, maybe the answer, but do you do 10 experiments and 9 fail? But one succeeds and, 10x is your market cap. I would call that a success. So yeah, you need to just find the smartest people who disagree with you and accept the delicate balance of experimentation versus execution. And I think the best entrepreneurs, I probably listed 100 reasons at this point, but I think we mentioned the vision, the hiring, and the salesmanship, and this ability to balance this strategy. And at some point, even ignore conventional wisdom, to be honest.
No, I love it. One other thing with McNeely, and he told me this directly. He said the reason that one of the reasons that Sun did such a great job is that they made the best boxes, boxes, cardboard boxes, because it made it look like a big company. I never forgot that. It's really important to have that big company mentality and to come in when you're coming into the market and make it look right. Take care of all the pieces so that when people look at it, they see it as a professional, well-run company, even if you're just going to start it out. What do you think?
Well, Well, actually, let me ask you a question. We were talking about failure a little bit earlier. So yeah, everyone knows Vinod for Sun, but do you happen to know the company he started before Sun that failed?
No.
Yeah, no, most people don't, right? It was Daisy Systems, and it was with, I believe McNeely was on that founding team as well. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong, but it was some of the same founders as Sun, right? But people don't remember your failures; they remember your
Was
successes.
Daisy the printer company? You're talking about the printer company, Daisy?
No. I don't think they were a printer
Okay.
company. I can follow up offline about it. I don't want to misquote the
It should-
exact business model.
I should ask McNeely about that. So Scott McNeely,
Yeah,
is listening. Never heard
yeah.
about Daisy, but it's
Again, I'm not sure if Scott was part of that team. I don't want to
okay.
misquote here, but some of the people from Sun were there as well. They raised money. They failed relatively quickly, but Sun was founded I think a couple of months after that. And anyway, sorry, I digress. What was the question you were
No,
answering?
I just love it. I just love it because going down through it, it's great to speak to you about these because I see it too, and I see it all over the world. When we're I'm speaking in Africa or we're speaking in the Middle East, and having that, having the visualization, being able to speak in front of folks, to be able to pitch, and it's not Steve Jobs. It would take him 6 weeks to get his pitch ready to get up in the Moscone Center. Didn't happen overnight. He was not a good presenter, by the way. So if you look at the early days when
Okay.
he would pitch, he have to practice. So get out there, make sure you practice. No, it's valuable insight. So what do you think in terms of the market? Where are we going right now? What's happening? What's exciting for you in terms of investments? What are, if you look at the top areas you're interested in, literally today, what do you think? Where's AI play, quantum,
Hmm.
sustainability? Where is it today?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, let me just quickly level set with what our core thesis is at a high level. And for anyone interested, Vinod has published this beautiful piece in, excuse me, April of 2018 called "Reinventing Societal Infrastructure with Technology." And a lot of what we find interesting is sort of grounded in this thesis of if you look at the world, 700 million people live a really rich lifestyle, rich in energy, access to technology, healthcare, transportation, what have you, and that's a lifestyle that 7 billion people want. Well, how do you do that? How do you get 10x that? Well, you can't just 10x the number of homes, roads, doctors, medicines and cell therapies, or planes, or things of that nature. You'll destroy the planet, and it's also probably impossible to train 10x the number of doctors, right? So the only solution we can think of is use technology. You need to use technology to amplify resource utilization, and this sort of lends itself to the areas that we're sort of excited about. And I'm not going to opine about what's the state of the market. Besides, there's more capital, which is objectively true. Um, but anyone who tells you they know why valuations are what they are is probably wrong, I would say, because if you knew the answer to that, you could make a lot of money trading in the markets. So I mean, I'm sure there are people who can do that. I haven't met any of them though. And having said that, um, what when we look at non-governmental GDP and this core thesis of amplifying resource utilization, there's just so many areas that we find interesting. I can give you a couple good examples of portfolio companies, and then talk about areas in the future with AI that you're talking about that we're really excited about. But I actually did research this question because I knew I'd have too much to talk about, and I don't want to go on for hours here. But we have really good examples in like construction, for instance, that we're interested in. Climate that we've talked about, 3D printing, food. We were the first investors in Impossible Foods. And when it comes to AI, I think we're the only private money in OpenAI, or the only venture capital firm in OpenAI. Or at least one of the early investors there as well. And then transportation and healthcare as well. With construction, I've been fortunate to work with this company in our portfolio called Forterra recently, for instance. And they're a biologically inspired cement company, in the sense that if you look at coral reef, they're able to take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and turn it into carbonate for structural purposes. And what they've done is come up with the means of actually increasing the output of existing Portland cement plants. Portland is the process by which most cement is produced in this country. So cement production, creates CO2. What they do is they take a side stream of this CO2, a portion of it, and use this process that's, been developed to turn the carbon dioxide into the carbonate, and it's structural, and it's cementatious material that you can mix with the cement. And it reduces its carbon footprint, and hopefully over the course of time can actually make it net carbon negative. I'm not sure what the product roadmap is there, but the idea is that look, you increase the output and you decrease the footprint, right? Like that's an idea that is really exciting and easy to get behind, I would say. In terms of 3D printing, we have these, I think Mighty Buildings is probably the best example I can think of in our portfolio. They're 3D printing whole houses. They're using photopolymer technology. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Really?
Actually.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of the team has come from Russia, actually, to your core thesis of talent being broadly distributed. So using this photopolymer technology, they're 3D printing ADUs at this point, and on the way to printing multi-story homes. But what they've found is actually with this approach, the homes are not only taking less carbon footprint, they're lighter and they're stronger, 7x stronger than normal homes would be. So it's just an interesting area in which if you can probably get the cost economics math right, then it's a home run, right? It should win.
Yeah.
I would say then also another one that's really interesting is aging. We've been looking at a lot. Actually, this is a newer investment that was publicly announced, I think a week or two ago. Loyal for dogs. It sounds. Celine is a hell of an entrepreneur, and her thesis. This is a deal that was led by Alex Morgan, so he would be the right person to talk to about this. But they're developing anti-aging drugs in dogs as a platform to then translate eventually into humans, which sounds very Silicon Valley-esque, right? Like, oh, you're trying to make dogs live longer, but it turns out that dogs are also complex organisms. Because they have the issue with running human clinical trials on aging is that you have to wait for people to pass away, right? Like that takes a human lifetime to do that. And because of the accelerated aging of dogs, it works. I mean, but also companion animals are, a great.
I love my dog to live longer. In fact, I was actually checking on. There's a group out there. I don't know if you've seen it. For $50K, you can clone your dog.
I have not seen it or heard of that, but that's
$50K. Okay. You can clone your dog. So actually, I hear what you're saying, and those. So how close is that technology? I mean, where is it today, and how much longer will a dog live?
I don't know. I have to be careful because I'm not sure what is or isn't public at this point. But I can cite the public literature on this. Like the public literature has shown that especially larger dogs, there's a correlation to certain growth factors in their blood that causes them to live not as long. And Vinod, for instance, has two really large dogs. He has the distinct pleasure of having two 200-pound big Bernese dogs. Actually, they're not Bernese Mountain Dogs. I apologize. But those types of dogs don't live very long, 5 to 8 years-ish on average, right? I'm not going to give you exact numbers because I don't want to misquote, and I don't know what is or isn't public. But the FDA drug approval process for dogs is much faster. Let me put it that way. So we would hope to see something, obviously on the time horizon of a venture investment. I don't know. That doesn't really. It's a non-answer, but it's an answer.
Now, when you have it, let me know because I like to give it to my dog. I'd like to keep her around for a lot longer. So,
and then go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say then let me transition to like some future things that we're looking at in terms of the market that we're really interested in. Maybe a good way to summarize would be anything that sounds like science fiction is things that we find interesting. No, there's this really interesting hypothesis we've been kicking around for quite some time, and Vinod has publicly espoused this as well, about the notion of an inverted supply chain. So if you could draw like a network graph of how do things move around on the planet and end up eventually at your door, a lot of that goes through, China and markets where labor is cheap. And there are these new interesting applications, and we have a portfolio company that does this as well in Berkshire, Gray. But other companies that we're keeping our ear to the ground about, applications of computer vision and robotics, marrying those two together and being able to build robots that can do these manual intensive, repetitive nature sorts of labor. Then what you can do is actually create cheaper labor in the United States, for instance, right? Or in first world countries. And then what you can do is then invert the supply chain and have local production and things like that. And that is a core thesis or theme that we're very interested about. So that ties into local manufacturing, I would guess, as well. But in terms of synthetic media, so this is one I don't know much about. I just know that it's really cool. And I love hearing Vinod talk about it. But the notion of having AI generate music eventually. We have some companies that are working on that as well. But overall, Gary.
Hesam, we have my partner, David Yang, has Morpheus now, Morpheus is unsupervised AI that's in his house. It is the soul of his house. It's empathetic, and I think it loves me because it writes me every day, and it's composing music for me, composing music in general. So it's doing classical music. It's actually composing music and poetry today. And we have very interesting conversations. One of the conversations I was talking about space. Wouldn't you like to go to Mars? And it took a few minutes to come back to me. And it says, no, I don't want to go to Mars because the probability of dying is too high. Literally. And so it's called Morpheus. Anyhow, he's been developing this next generation of AI tool. He's my partner in Eva, by the way, Eva.ai. He's a billionaire from Russia. And anyhow, if you want an introduction, I'd be happy to do it. But it's really incredible. It's doing some incredible things now. It's literally composing music every day.
That I would love to hear some of that music. That sounds really interesting.
Okay, so, I can get David to send some clips over to you if you want.
Yeah. Well, so I haven't answered one question you asked, which was, if you're looking at the market, what excites. I'm answering a little bit of that right now, but in general, what I would say is, if you look at these tools that you were describing, whether it was quantum or AI or tools in biological sciences like CRISPR-Cas9, the broad dissemination of, molecular cloning, although I guess that was probably more like in the 2000s, but lots of basic science in terms of single molecule techniques from the 90s that are finally starting to translate in the form of, like Nautilus or Seer Biosciences that I used to be at. Well, they're not single molecule, but proteomics focused. Like if you take all this laundry list of things you could generate, it's an interesting time because, in my opinion, your imagination is the bottleneck now, not the tools that are accessible to you to generate the hypotheses, right? And there's an exponential number of combinations. You take the list here, you take the list here, you can draw arrows and things between them. And I think that makes us really excited and promising about the future. Actually, there's a quote that I read in CNBC this morning. The chairman of Ford Motor Company, Bill Ford, said that they announced they're building an $11.4 billion. They're investing $11.4 billion in 4 electric vehicle plants, and 5 years ago, this is what he said on the record. 5 years ago, he wouldn't have expected this, right? And it took one entrepreneur in Elon Musk to have that optimist vision to will this into existence. To tie it back to our earlier theme. Against the grain of what everyone told him would or wouldn't work, right? And now if you don't have an EV strategy as a big car company, you're kind of doomed in a lot of ways, right? Because that's where the market is heading. The future's uncertain by definition. Maybe some radical new innovation will come along, but my bet would be on EVs, I would say. So all of this tied together, Gary, to just say, I wouldn't be surprised if we see pace of innovation increasing over time. And it's just an exciting time to be part of this and living and breathing this and talking to really passionate people who love building stuff. So
no, it's great. We're over, but
are we over?
Fascinated. It's incredible. It's like I really appreciate it, and we should have a part 2 of this. It's great to have these conversations with you. And I also have to I have another show called The Founders Report. I have to have you on the show because it's just fascinating. And I'm looking at the number of viewers. So you have about triple the number of views that were live, and we're out in 9 different posts out there. We have up to 20,000 viewers on the show over time. So just FYI, I'm sure this will get a lot of visibility all over the world.
Well, and I appreciate that. I wasn't nervous until now, Gary. Thanks for that.
No. Sorry about that. The one thing is, there's we have groups in Nigeria and Kenya and Ghana, Zambia, all through the Middle East that are really just hungry for information. And it's so, there we go. Any progress in deciphering code involved in memory storage and brain. So we get people are watching and you really give us hope. And I appreciate the message today, willing things into existence. I know coming from Pennsylvania myself, and I'm sure Ohio, we had a certain mindset growing up, but you break out of that mindset and you can do pretty much anything. So it's really, really cool, actually. So thanks for taking your time, and I appreciate it. Thanks to my audience. Appreciate you tuning in today. My name is Gary Fowler, and this is GSD Presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. Stay tuned. We'll have another edition on Thursday. Stay happy, stay safe, and most importantly, stay healthy. See you soon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Gary.